Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So if you're having difficulty following these arguments and you're hanging in regardless, you deserve extra credit. And not only that, but you're obviously paying attention. So I want to thank you for doing that. So yesterday, Shira Beth pointed out a difficulty, and that was that we had these two opinions on why the word ziruz, or why the word tzav is used in this particular parsha, as opposed to in other times when God tells Moses to command people, doesn't say tzav. And the first anonymous explanation was that the reason it had to be said is to avoid procrastination, that there was a need to urge Aaron and his sons to perform the olah because it had to be done immediately and then in all future generations. And then we had, if I'm not mistaken, was it Rabbi Shimon? I don't have this in front of me, so I'm not sure if it's Rabbi Shimon. I think it's Rabbi Shimon, who says, especially in a case where there is chesron kis meaning pecuniary loss. And the reason for the loss is that when a Kohen brought most sacrifices, all sacrifices pretty much, except for the olah, the priest was rewarded in some way with some of the meat from the olah. And in the case of the olah, he was only given the hide of the olah. That was all he was given. And so Rabbi Shimon is concerned that the priest would need to be urged because that was minimal compensation for what they had to do, for all the work they had to do in bringing in olah. And we were looking at the Torah Temimah, and the Torah Temimah was saying that the basis of their distinction has to do with another disagreement between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Elazar holds that the olah was only brought, this daily perpetual offering, we're talking about this tamid olah, was only brought once they got to the land of Israel. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, the tamid was brought, this olah was brought immediately from the point that it was commanded during the years in the desert. And that you can match up then the anonymous opinion with Rabbi Akiva, because it had to be done immediately. And for and the other opinion, Rabbi Shimon's opinion, would match the argument that the tamid was only brought once they actually got into the land of Israel and started to bring the olah. And for that reason, immediately and future generations doesn't work for Rabbi Shimon. Shira Beth mentioned, well, wait a second, I mean, financial loss applies no matter what. So why doesn't the first Tana hold that opinion as well? And I couldn't really answer that question well, because it's a very good kasha. It's a very good point. And so as I thought about it, I thought to myself, well, certainly the argument of the first Tana does not work for Rabbi Shimon, right, at all. But on the other hand, the first Tana may want to actually emphasize the issue of procrastination, and sense that that was a more important issue, that procrastination was more of an important issue in preventing, let's say, or unmotivating the Kohanim to do what they needed to do, as opposed to pecuniary loss.
And a thought that I had, and you're probably going to say, no, this is wrong.
You're wrong. Yeah.
Well, like there's a difference between lying, directly, and not stealing, not telling, omitting telling the truth. They're just, it's a subtle difference, but it's different. So maybe there's a difference between suffering the monetary loss of, and not being rewarded in the same way as with other sins.
Yes, I was thinking as you were saying, and perhaps I wasn't giving you sufficient concentration, but the fact that the truth is, not everybody gets upset about not being paid for something. Not everyone would look at it as monetary loss. I mean, there are some people for whom money is a very, very important issue, such as if you're offered $9 million for doing nothing. Um, and on the other hand, procrastination, I wonder if that doesn't affect more of us. I mean, I haven't studied the subject. I haven't done any research in it, but I just feel that, the sort of inner procrastination, especially if it's to be done immediately, is a greater issue. So that's another way of looking at it in terms of subtle distinctions that you were pointing out.
And procrastination, of course, can cause monetary loss.
Yes, it can. It certainly can. There's a proverb about that, by the way, right? That putting things off and putting things off, and then the roof falls in. Yes. Uh, let's go into the text now. So I'm going to start the screen share. And Judith and David, welcome. It's good to see you here. I'm happy to have you and welcome you as well. All right. Let's take a look at where we are. Let's go back a little bit. These are not easy Rashis. They are not easy Rashis because he's dealing with halacha here. So we'll do the best we can on this. I'm trying to see where we are actually at. All right, we did this yesterday, and I'm not sure that we finished it off because we started to run out of time. Okay. Let's. Do you want me to review that sentence, or do you want me to move on? Okay, I will move on. The lavash hakohen midorbad, and the kohen should put on, he should wear his clothing of linen, and here it's talking about the tunic, the ketonet, umichnesebad, and he should wear his. This is the trousers of linen. Yilbash al besaro, he should put that directly on his flesh. In other words, it's an undergarment. That is an undergarment. Veherim et hadeshim, and he should remove the ashes. Asher tochal ha'esh, which the fire has consumed, or with which the fire has consumed et ha'olah, the olah sacrifice, al hamizbeach, on the altar, the samo etzel hamizbeach, and he should place it next to the altar. And you notice, of course, how few verses from the actual Torah are in each page compared to tons and tons and tons of commentary. And you also notice, I'm sure, that the syntax of the sentence is very labored. And the reason why is that we are really talking chapter headings here. And I'm not kidding when I say chapter headings. So each little piece of the sentence can actually be interpreted and thought through quite considerably. And you can see there's so little Rashi in comparison to all the Torah Temimah, because the Torah Temimah is trying to fill in what the Rashi leaves out and give us a sense of what Rashi's really talking about. So I am going to stick with the Rashi so that you get a general sense, a gestalt of things. And I think that's the process. I mean, we could have just read Leviticus, and we could have just read, and we're reading Leviticus with Rashi, and I will have to trust you to read the Parsha in English in full, if Hebrew is not your comfort language. But that is at least a way to start to understand. And that's honestly the process of knowledge, as I've mentioned on numerous occasions, that it's an issue of deconstruction. So we know more and more about less and less, a little less part. So let's take a look at this. So the Kohen should don this linen cloak, midorbad. And because we've never seen this word midor before, okay, regarding the clothing of the priest, And it doesn't have to be the high priest. It can be any priest who's on that particular watch, right? He haktonet, Rashi tells us, that's referring to the garment that is called the ketonet, the cloak or the tunic. Umat, so that of course immediately pushes a question, which is Umat Talmud Lomar Mado, okay, or Mido, excuse me. And so why is scripture using this word Mido? Why didn't it just use the word ketonet? Shetahe kemidato. What scripture is trying to teach us is that it has to fit him well. It needs to be sized. So it has to fit his body appropriately, sized according to his body. Al basaro, so it needs on his flesh. And this is the case where it's talking about the trousers. Shelo, and I believe, here's the question. This is again, this raises a question. Is that in this sentence, does it refer this issue of it should be on his flesh only refer to the trousers, or does it refer to the ketonet as well? My guess is that it refers to the trousers, that it's what appeared immediately before the statement that it should be on his flesh. At any rate, Rashi is telling us, Shelo yehe davar chotzetz beinatayim, that there could not be anything that was interposing between the trousers and his flesh. Nothing. So they had to imagine that might, and again, when we say anything interposing, what are we talking about? Are we talking about dirt, for example? We probably are. In other words, they had to be perfectly clean. And it's also saying that he had to wash himself, right? That he couldn't have anything on his body that might be interposing. And by the way, that kind of notion applies even nowadays when a person goes to the mikveh. When they go to the mikveh, they're not supposed to have anything that interposes between their skin and the water.
I have a question.
Yes.
What about body hair? Because they're talking about not between your leg and the underpants or whatever, but between
Right.
your flesh.
Yes.
So that seems like it would exclude, you would have to shave.
Super question. I believe that when the priests, I believe this is I think this may be in Numbers, where they talk about the installation well, this is the Levites, okay? And they talk about shaving them. It's quite possible that the priests had to be shaved. It's possible. Although you don't, the issue is, can you consider your body hair to be part of your flesh, part of your skin? I think that's a legitimate question. And your question itself, of course, is totally legitimate and is probably under investigation within the material that looks and meditates on what we're reading. But you can see how this is just, the written Torah, which is what we're looking at, is merely a surface of so much that is actually underneath it. Let's keep going. Lauren, I don't know that I've answered your question adequately, but at least I've tried to, delve into the issues of the question a little deeper.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, you may not know an answer because it may be buried somewhere in,
Right.
a particular opinion, but
Right. No. I can tell you there are people with such encyclopedic knowledge that they would be able to answer that question categorically. So again, moving into the sentence, Vaherim et hadeshin. He should remove, literally Herim means to lift up, right? To remove the ashes. Haya choter, so he would rake melo ha-machta, the amount that would fill a fire pan, min ha-meukhalot, from the parts of the sacrifice that had been totally consumed, hapnimiot, that were on the inner element of the fire. So this at least gives you can visualize what's going on here. right? The parts of the animal itself, a lot of the animal, it's an olah after all, that are being burned on the altar and on this fire. And so he's being told to take those ashes that have consumed the animal, Venotnan, and he places them Mizracho shel Kevesh, and he places them on the east side of the Kevesh. Is the ramp. So again, I don't have a picture ready for you, and I'm going to ask you to please visualize that you know that on the altar was quite tall, and the priest would go up a ramp to work at the altar that was on the top of this base. And it was on the south side. This ramp was on the south side of the altar. And so he would go up this ramp, and then clearly he was told to remove the ashes from the inner part of the pyre. And he's telling you where this is to be found, where this is described. And then he now we're putting it asher tochal. So he says, so we're looking at this word hadesher, deshin, two times. Hadeshin asher tochal ha'esh et ha'olah. So we're talking about the ashes of that with which the fire has burnt, or through which the fire has burnt the olah sacrifice. I mean, it was probably a large pyre, and the animal only takes up a certain part. It's placed in the very center of it, where I imagine it's the hottest, and this is the part that had to be removed. So he's taking away the remnants of the sacrifice together with the wood of that has burnt it. Va'as ata deshin me'oto deshin. And he has to make ashes from those ashes, from those very ashes. And he's explaining to you what he means. Yarim truma, he shall take an offering, right? V'samo etzel hamizbeach, and place that next to the altar. So he goes on to, let's keep going, al hamizbeach, upon the altar, that it's burnt the olah on the altar, al hamizbeach. Matzah evarim, if so he has to essentially, he's taken these ashes down, he's placed them right next to the ramp, and now he has to sort of rake through what he's got there, okay? And if he finds remnants, evarim basically are limbs, because obviously the bones take a lot longer to decompose than the other parts of the animal. Sha'adain lo nitaklu, which have not yet decomposed, not yet been consumed by the fire. Machsiran al hamizbeach, he has to place them back, return them to the altar. La'achar shechete gechalim, after he has basically stoked the coals, stoked the embers, Elach va'elach, here and there, venatal min hapnimiyot, and he has to take from the innermost part of it, shene'emar, because it says et ha'olah al hamizbeach. That when he removes it, he has to take the olah while it is on the altar. So the animal itself has to have been consumed on the altar before its ashes can really be removed. And this means Barashi Yashan. In an earlier um, text of the Rashi, as it says there. So again, let's stand back for a moment and say, look at what's happened here. We've read this sentence in the Torah, and all of a sudden it now starts to blossom, you might say. I'm not saying that we wouldn't need to review this again. And they talk about, to study is lishanin or lishanot, which comes from shnayim. You go over it, and it starts to crystallize in your mind as to exactly what's going on. So if you don't understand it fully the first time, besides which, what do we mean by understand it fully, right? This is so much, there's so much to peel away. But I hope this is nevertheless both, it has to be interesting and educational and helps us understand better on a whole bunch of levels. We can stop here for a moment if you have some comments. I'll stop the share for a second.
Well, I have a comment, and if it's too off to the side, you can choose to ignore it. But you talked about a word, harem, I think that you said was going up or something.
The harem means
Yeah,
to.
and I've just noticed so many words meaning going up or up, like, there's lot obviously, and there's terumah, which is related to the ram going up and every, I mean, just so many words meaning up or going up. And it just seems like more than other words, it's just being like every once in a while, you say, this means going up. I'm like, oh, this too? And it just like clicking in that there's so many words.
Right. Naso, for example, means to.
Not, there's another one, right?
Yes. So what that's generating for me is the thought that we want people to know that there is an opportunity to draw close to God, that there really are many senses in which one can be uplifted.
Oh, this is really good. I'm glad I asked. So now it's like, okay, it's just a means of getting to God, because God is in, at least metaphorically up, right? But it's like, you could take a ladder, you could take an escalator, you can take an elevator, you can whatever, but and each of those is a metaphor for whatever spiritual path, but you're going up to.
Okay. Many years ago, it occurred to me that the essential purpose of religion, of formalized religion, is to give meaning. That what the worst thing that we can sense is that our life is meaningless. That's the worst feeling we can have. And I have a theory that, and Shira Beth, you might enjoy sort of expounding on it. You may have already, but there is a certain ennui, a certain depression existential depression that people have because they've abandoned religion. And so they are no longer focused on seeking meaning in a profound kind of way. And so people seek meaning in an immediately satisfactory, in ways that they feel are immediately satisfactory. But the problem with that is you're left holding nothing. It's satisfying. And then it's like, when you have an experience, or if you experience a meal and you leave that meal feeling satisfied, right? There's a great taste in your mouth. There's a sense of your appetite having been satisfied, etc. Well, we have spiritual appetites. And the truth is that, millennia ago, human beings, the very first thinking human being, would have asked themselves this question: Why was I? Why am I conscious? Why am I experiencing life? For what purpose is my existence? And all the problems I have to face and stuff like that. So when you add it all up, what does it really mean? And the truth is, I think, is that religion, that not just Judaism, but any religion worth its salt, is trying to find ways in which, as human beings, we can find ultimate purpose to our existence. And doing that in the presence of something that is, we look at the universe and recognize how far beyond it is of our understanding and comprehension. And the little that we do comprehend generally makes us feel very humbled by the enormity of it. And to think that each one of us is given the gifts in which to shine, in which to play a part of the ultimate source of all of this.
I agree, but I have to like amend this a little bit, because I think about somebody like my father, who wasn't a religious man, didn't, I doubt, believed in God and in any traditional ways of getting to God, like prayer and mitzvot or anything. But he had a purpose in life that became clear to him as a young adult,
Yes.
and that he had on so many different levels spent his life, fulfilling this purpose. And he was certainly doing God's work without the awareness of it.
Right.
What was
So-
that purpose? What was his
Oh,
mission?
incredible work. Go
It's
ahead.
hard to explain in anything other than the word do-gooder. But professionally, personally, in so many ways, he was always helping people who needed help. And so were his parents, by the way. But also there are people who are very steeped in religious study who just don't get it. And their understanding and lifestyle doesn't really match their noble study. So I think that you're right, but not everybody understands it that way, and that you can be on a spiritual path without knowing it, and you can think you are when you're not.
I agree entirely, Lauren. I really do. I do. There's a statement by, I believe, Rabbi Akiva, and I wish I could quote it directly, but it is in Pirkei Avot, where he says, how wonderful that the Jewish people were given these Torah and mitzvot, right? But then he says, and even more so, that they realized that these are Torah and mitzvot, that they recognize that they're connected to this ineffable and infinite source of everything. So not everybody has a need to parse things out the way I just did. But I absolutely agree that I know of many people who are not religious, who wouldn't say they believed in God. But I try to, I use that flip response with, maybe the God you don't believe in is the God I don't believe in either, right? So it has to do with, a desire to try to articulate something that is very hard to articulate. And some people have a need to do it, and other people don't have a need to do it. But what really matters ultimately is that it's being done. And your father was a person who was doing it. Would he have? I never met your father. I don't know if he suffered from any depression or feelings of frustration. I would never claim to you that I don't face sadness myself, or even stuff that borders on depression. But I will tell you that so often when I do study Torah, it lifts me from that depression. It's
And
amazing how it can happen.
this is why I'm back doing what I'm doing, and then doing something new, which is studying with everyone. And I use, the morning services also, and Saturday to study. And then the singing Shabbat, it's exactly what we're talking about right now, is my desire to uplift, to elevate, and to have people who are maybe struggling, with this concept of God, to come and have a place to that they are inspired to look more, because I don't do it deeply, I don't go into intellectual things deeply, yet there's this spirit of elevation. And I'm loving studying this stuff, by the way, because it keeps bringing up why I'm here and why I keep grappling with the really tough stuff that I find distasteful and would turn me away, except there's this burning spirit inside. And I think it's from all the generations, all of our ancestors that have done the same thing and faced these things together.
Thank you. We have to stop, I'm afraid. It's 8:00. And on Wednesday morning, there is a Shiva service at 8:00, and a lot of people will start joining. So I probably would have to stop earlier so that people can join and not be recorded. I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you for being with us today.